Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to bring you Healing Heroic Dazar'alor Part 3. Everything you need to know about healing Mekkatorque, Stormwall Blockade, and Jaina from the healer point of view. Starting off with Heroic Mekkatorque, big things about the fight are going to be staying in close to the boss, be able to spawn any of the spark bots close by, and have an easier time dodging any of his buster cannons that will be going out from him, similar to what you'll see on a normal mode. On Heroic, you also have to make sure, just like a normal, to be able to deal with any of the bombs. So we made sure we set up specified areas where players would go to be able to drop them off quickly and efficiently, and then getting closer into the boss made things quite a bit easier. Blast off damage is really going to be the large AoE raid-wide damage in the first phase, and then after the intermission phase as you get into the final phase. So what we did for this is made sure that we set up a cooldown order, just quick priority system, who was using the cooldowns first, and then as they started coming off, once again we were able to start rotating through them quickly. Because we were running our cloth and plate split run, we had double disc priests, so we had constant ramp ups for the blast offs. Timing for these blast offs as discipline could be a little bit more tedious based off of the continuous abilities that he would be casting throughout the fight. So sometimes he would show the cooldown or timer run out for when he would use his blast off, but then he'd be casting his buster cannon or casting wormhole generator, and it's always important, or even any of the bombs that are going out. And it's always important to make sure you're watching those timers and you're starting to get at least a loose preparation, and if you're having more pulls on it, you'll start seeing some of the extra timings and where you can start optimizing them just a little bit further. The closer you are into the boss makes it all that much more easy to be able to get everybody topped off, and for you to be able to hit the maximum amount of players with your powered radiance. How we did it early was just having H-Pally wings going off, and then we started rotating through first CD with Holy Word Salvation on the second blast off. Third was Divine Hymn, fourth was Tranquility, which carried us into the intermission. The Disc Priests usually alternated between Rapture and Evangelism for any of the ramp ups to assist with those raid cooldowns. For us, 5 healing the fight, it seemed more like we were overhealing it around a 20-22 man run, so you probably can, depending on the strength of your healers, maybe run a few less, but it's always something to kind of consider going into the encounters. How much healing are you really going to need, and in the most critical parts. Once you enter the intermission phase, there's going to be a lot of extra damage going out from any of those exploding sheep, and you will have players periodically getting shrunken, and on Mythic you'll also be having players getting grown larger. So for this, we try to make sure people stayed spread out, and of course we're able to watch out for each other to not stomp them, and any healers that were shrunk in the intermission phase did not go into the bots. That way we'd more easily be able to top off any players taking any kind of damage from spark bots, from any damage from any of these sheep that were exploding shrapnel or anything onto the group, and generally have an easier time to deal with all of that. So in the intermission phase, didn't have any healers go in, but during the regular phase, when only 3 players were getting shrunk to deal with the bots, those healers of course did have to go in there. At this intermission phase, we usually look to have a CD early on if there's any damage. If there wasn't enough, then we would hold it until just as Mekkatorque was going to be landing, as he does pulse for quite a bit of damage. So there we had Tranquility, we had Holy Pally Wings, and Devotion Aura. So Tranquility first before Mekkatorque lands, and then Devo Aura as the bot lands, and then Pally Wings to be able to heal everybody up from that damage. Then we went back, and as cooldowns started coming back, we started cycling through them again in a very similar order throughout the fight. The damage will continue to ramp up with the spark bots, especially if they're allowed to run free and are not broken out by any of the players. You can expect the end of the fight to go into more of a burn phase, and really heavy AoE healing be required. Barrier can be a little bit difficult to be able to use in this encounter, so often I would opt to just make sure you have a loose system of whenever you're seeing decent damage and a good enough clump of players to be able to stack up, to look to try to take advantage there. But otherwise, focusing on keeping in close to the boss to be able to dodge any of the buster cannons and keep spark bots close by, be able to get them quickly rooted and taken care of, and then getting in with the group for the end of the fight for that straight burn. Shouldn't have too much trouble on this encounter. Moving on to Heroic Blockade, you're going to have 2 ships that players will be able to take the pterodactyls to go Rhina on and drop you off onto one of the ships. On the right side, you'll have Brother Joseph, and on the left side, Sister Catherine. At around 50% HP, both Tide Sages will switch ships, and you'll have to deal with the other Tide Sages mechanics throughout the rest of the fight on those ships. Then once you kill both of them, you'll be able to go back to the docks and be able to kill the actual boss. Brother Joseph will be putting a number of these Sea Storm pools onto the ground. These will help you slow in case any of the sirens come out. We opted to make sure that we had at least one priest on each side. Here we have 2 with our split runs, and this allowed us to make sure any of Brother Joseph's sirens would be having a backup plan in case they were not killed in time, as the sirens will attract 1 player off the edge of the ship, and having a life grip there to be able to bring somebody back is incredibly helpful. Sister Catherine, of course, will be putting out the voltaic flashes, the lines that you need to dodge, which always alternate in orders. And you'll also have the crackling lightning, which needs to be dropped off in a corner, which does drop off damage and will silence nearby players if you're standing too close. So as long as you have a decent distance between yourself and keeping into the middle of the boat and dropping those lightnings off at the edges of the boat, you shouldn't have too much trouble dealing with that. Once you end up burning both of them down and interrupting any of their casts, you will then be able to move on to the boss itself. From here, the damage is incredibly minor. You will have the Ire of the Deep, which will be those circles that you need to be soaking. For us on Heroic, we opted to have just about everybody soak, resulting in very light damage going out onto the group. This allowed us just have mainly passive healing, and the damage component for the healers became a lot more important. How much damage did the healers deal to the adds as they came out became the name of the game after that point. There we were able to start staying together as a group and be able to soak them, and a lot of the damage that was going on with the group from that point was a lot of avoidable damage from any of the sea swells coming out. So being able to dodge sea swells as a group, staying out of the void zones, and then focusing down the adds was key from that point. Holy Priest, or any priest, can use Shining Force. Any Disco or Holy Priest can use Shining Force to be able to not knock back the target, but provide a very heavy, although short duration slow to any of the energized storms that are coming out. You can even cast it off another player. If you're having the tank instantly running back to drop the debuff onto them, you can cast Shining Force off the tank. It'll instantly apply that 70% slow for a few seconds before other players are able to get their damage onto the energized storm and the resulting slows after it. A lot of the wipes we had was just players forgetting to apply any of their slows or not focusing on the ad quickly enough to be able to deal with it. And from there, it'll simply be dodging sea swells, soaking Ire of the Deeps, and then burning the adds as quickly as they come. And finally, Heroic Jaina. The fight has a number of different phases and is a lot longer of an encounter with a lot of RP and a lot of build-up with this final boss. When you start off onto the ship, Jaina will be surrounded by 2 Kultiran Marines. Priest can use Mind Control to drag these Marines off the ship and jump them off, quickly dealing with them before they start setting any charges. Anytime you're having a Kultiran ship coming into the left or right side, they'll also drop Marines, which will continue to drop those charges. If they're not kicked off the ship, they will deal an incredible amount of damage to the raid, which can be very dangerous if anybody's standing in any of the fire pools and or taking any other avoidable damage. You'll have to watch out for the frontal from Jaina periodically, but the tanks should be able to face that away from the group. Any of these fire patches on the ground can be removed by using Avalanche, but also whenever you have the Grasp of Frost that Jaina will periodically be casting on different players, those will also start applying grasps of chill to those targets, cause them to take a little bit of extra damage, and you'll see later on in the fight, getting heavier stacks of that will lead to players being frozen. So as long as the players aren't in danger, it's not a massive deal to be dispelling them because they can quickly get out of it, or we had Shadow Priests who were using mass dispels too. But getting into the habit of getting quick dispels out will be important, especially if there's any avalanches or you're seeing any of the fire patches on the ground. So getting into the good habit of instant dispels, and if any players have the chilled stacks on them, they can quickly remove them by stepping into the fire very rapidly. The Ring of Frost that she will be casting will require players to run into any of those fire patches to be able to avoid any of her rooting effect, which will again give more stacks. So that was, in the first phase, the real area that we ended up using raid cooldowns, not because there was overly large amount of damage from standing in the fire for 1 or 2 ticks, but because it would save healer mana, and there really wasn't a lot of big damaging mechanics in the first phase, short of players just standing in avoidable damage. As Jaina teleports players and forces players into the Frost phase, when you have to go chase after her, the more that you're able to tilt your camera down, the easier it is to see what's going to be coming up in front of you. But the more that you tilt your camera up, while you won't be able to see as far out, it will allow you to have a little bit better depth perception as to how close things are, and maybe make a little bit easier of a time to plan out where you're going to be. You'll have to be dodging any of the tornadoes as well as the smaller swirlies coming out from the boss, and making sure if you are not hit by any of them, because if you are, you will be frozen solid, and this is going to be a very tedious debuff. It'll be extremely annoying to be broken out of if you're not sitting in melee. The majority of this fight, the more you're able to sit in melee, the easier to be able to deal with a lot of the mechanics. You will still have to deal with the avalanche, but it'll be on the tanks alone. Boss will put out broadsides, which players will use to break out the unexploded ordnance. And really, from a healer cooldown perspective, as long as you're getting your ordnance out reasonably quickly, the damage does not get too terribly heavy. The big thing is the extra mistakes players make, or how much they're staying spread out and not getting in with the group, causing extra damage onto themselves or others as a result. Those are the areas you really need to start making up for with your healing. But otherwise, the group would just travel from one ordinance to the next, popping them periodically, and everybody being able to drop their stacks. At the moment, just before people drop their stacks from the ordinance, was usually when we started cycling through cooldowns. And mainly it was to save healer mana for that last phase when it becomes a straight burn and you're not able to remove any of your stacks. Once you break out the third of the ordinance, you will have to deal with the ice wall. And from this point, it's also just going to be how well your healers can contribute to adding extra mana, or contribute to adding extra damage and conserving their own mana for that later part of the encounter. And for us, going into that last part of the fight with full or near full mana was absolutely imperative. So adding whatever damage you can to break the wall of ice, and then breaking the Thanos and start working on the Tide Elemental was key. We also had our rest of Shamans using Windrush Totem so that the group would more easily be able to run in and out when we had our Mail and Leather group. But when we were in our Cloth and Plate group, we started dropping some feathers or using grips to help players, more speedy players who had interrupts, to be able to get back to Jaina, quickly interrupt her after we broken the Thanos out, and then start up the final phase of the encounter. Final phase has a lot of similarities to the second part. You'll still have broadsides, you'll still have the cannon fire, that singular cannon fire that'll be dealing some big AoE damage. We also have this Orb of Frost, which we use to gather extra stacks onto a specific group of players. So you'd have the range DPS taking those extra stacks, those extra chilled stacks, so they'd be frozen more rapidly than the melee pile. When you're having a good separation between range getting frozen first, then the melee is able to break them out, it makes it a lot easier and a lot more consistent as you're going throughout the run, rather than having a large mass of players getting iced over all at once and lacking enough DPS to break them out before the players trying to break them out get frozen themselves. Glacial Ray is still going to be going out periodically over the fight, making sure you're dodging it, but you'll also be having the Crystalline Dust, which ended up killing a lot of players if you're not careful, especially when she goes into her Ice Block phase. She almost locks on to one period that she's looking at. Whenever we use Bloodlust, you would lock on to one specific area that she was facing, and then almost always Crystalline Dust as she came out, and that ended up killing a lot of players. When we use Bloodlust, we try to make sure we had a lot of people in their ice blocks and quickly breaking them out at the time, using the living action pots or using our Bloodlust to quickly DPS the blocks down, making it a lot easier to be able to get the damage lessening on a number of different people in the group, getting them broken out, and then people breaking them out would get their 20 stacks, and then we'd have to break them out as well. So alternating who would be breaking out of those, and as a healer, being able to quickly and efficiently apply healing to those who are most in need, while helping even gripping some players out of the way of any of those ice shards that were coming out, was incredibly helpful for us. But at the end of the fight, it becomes a straight burn, doing as much healing as you can, keeping everybody close together, and burning down Jaina to that 4.5–5% HP to be able to finish the fight. Jaina was a bit more underwhelming of a healer encounter than we had previously anticipated, and a lot of it came down to watching out for avoidable damage and making sure everybody was staying tightly packed in together for ease of healing. Hope you all found the heroic section helpful. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section down below, and we'll be continuing right away with Mythic videos as soon as possible. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions about my UI or anything else like that, check out the links below. They should be able to answer all your questions. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to check out the live stream as well. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll catch y'all next time.